Well, good morning. Happy Monday. Back at it. Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And last week, I was off on Friday, but I gave you a news segment, and some of you may have seen it on the YouTube channel, or you may have heard it driving into work. Either way, we're revisiting now the issue of the YMCA and here in Springfield, where a young girl was raising the concern of a transgender individual in the women's locker room. So you heard last week the story from Abigail Wheeler, her father, Dan Wheeler, responding to some questions, but also a transgender individual who believes that they were the one in the locker room whenever Abigail had her concerns. And we shared those words from Christina Newton last week, and we'll hear from her again a little bit later on, coming up here with WMAY. But just to recap, some of the concerns that Abigail raised when she took to a news conference outside of the YMCA in Springfield, and talked about how this all came about and why she felt her concerns were being dismissed. So again, here's Abigail Wheeler from Thursday here in Springfield.
Good afternoon. My name is Abigail Wheeler, and I am 16 years old. After seeing the man in the women's locker room, I was scared and upset. I decided to leave immediately because I was alone with them and felt very uncomfortable. I went to my coach, Alex Tatura, and told him that there is a man in the women's locker room. He responded that he was aware of it and there was nothing he could do. That is when I realized this was not my first time seeing this man in the women's locker room. About roughly 4 months earlier, I was again in the locker room changing with a group of girls out of our swimsuits. When I looked across the locker room, I saw what I thought was a very manly looking woman sitting on a chair in the corner wearing a women's swimsuit. Even though it seemed suspicious, I didn't say anything and kept myself wrapped in my towel while changing. When I asked my coach how long they knew that biological men were changing in the women's locker room, I was laughed at and told that, I quote, "transgenders have been around a long time." I replied, "That is not what I asked," and restated the question to them. Finally, the CEO responded that the YMCA had been aware for a while. I was also told that if I wasn't comfortable changing in the women's locker room, that I could use the family changing areas or not use the facilities at all.
So, again, just some of what Abigail Wheeler had to say. We aired it mostly in its entirety last week, but I just wanted to revisit to kind of set the table as to her concerns that she raised. Her sister, Caitlyn, was also there to support Abigail, and Caitlyn shares a similar story from when they were at a college swim meet herself, dealing with the issue of Leah Thomas. Here's Caitlyn Wheeler from Thursday.
I recently retired from the sport of swimming back in 2022. I competed at the Division I NCAA meet where many women, including myself, were forced to not only compete against, but change in the same locker room as biological man identifying as Leah Thomas. This was far from an experience to which I felt comfortable or safe. I cannot express the shock and feelings of extreme discomfort that were very real in that locker room when we were forced to share our changing space with a fully grown man. So to find out that now my little sister is going through the same thing is infuriating and disheartening. Women have been told to stay silent, but we mustn't stay silent. We must speak and speak loudly. And it can't just be women. We need men, fathers, sons, brothers to stand with us. Parents, you need to wake up. If this does not infuriate you or deeply bother you or you feel like you can't do anything about it, you're part of the problem. My family has been impacted by this twice now, not on two completely separate, non-related instances. And I know that we're not the first, nor will we be the last if something isn't done. I don't have kids, but I hope that one day I'll be blessed enough to have a daughter of my own. I would even be more blessed if she takes after her mother and becomes an athlete. Yes. I want my future daughter and your future daughters to be able to not only compete fairly in sports, but to be able to have safe changing spaces. is why I stand here today. For her, and for my little sister Abigail, and for the other little girls out there who may not have a voice, because that's what it's going to take. Today, Abigail has shared her story with you all, so now you have no excuse for not knowing what's happening. You have a responsibility. And to those of you in authority who were told and did nothing, shame on you, and I hope it haunts you at night. Now that you know Abigail's story, if you aren't doing something about it, you are guilty of allowing it to happen. And if it's not knocking on your door already, it is, or it will. And when it does, it will be too late. We must protect our children, and we must stand up for our freedoms, or they will continue to be stripped away. So I stand with Abigail, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
So, again, that's Caitlyn Wheeler, Abigail Wheeler's sister, Thursday last week, talking about her own personal story and how she experienced that as a collegiate swimmer, never thinking that her 16-year-old sister would have to go through that. We'll obviously hear from the YMCA. The Illinois Times had a chance to touch base with the CEO there, but also the transgender individual who believes that they were the one that was in the locker room causing the concerns. So we'll hear that coming up. But Dan Wheeler, the father of Abigail and of Caitlyn, took to the podium and shared his thoughts, but he also took questions for the family. And here's some of what the questions were really about. Did anybody show themselves to Abigail or to any other children in the changing room? And Dan Wheeler fired back on that.
With this whole interaction, was there at any point where the person that was in the locker room was in any way threatening you directly or?
Let me answer it. I think it's. I wanted you to know our family's position. It's not whether a biological male is naked, whether a biological male is leering, whether a biological male has a camera out. It's the fact that there's a biological male in the girls' locker room.
So obviously a lot of passion involved in this issue. So again, I did reach out to have the YMCA on air with us today. They responded and said, listen, the family has debunked their own story, saying that they pulled Abigail off of the swim team. But Dan Wheeler saying that was only because they were really given no choice. So there's a little bit of a difference of opinion on how that happened. But the crux of the issue is what Dan Wheeler just laid out there. It's not that somebody may have been, naked or taking pictures or leering. It was simply that a biological male was in the restroom or a changing room for women and girls. So coming back, we'll hear what the YMCA had to tell the Illinois Times, because they say that they're done talking about this, at least in the most recent statement I got back from them, looking for an interview for this morning. But we'll also hear from a Freedom Caucus member, State Representative Freeze, an attorney who questions the legal principle that the YMCA is using when it comes to defending, allowing for transgender individuals in the women's locker room. So stay tuned. We'll get to that coming up here with WMAY. I'm Greg Bishop. Follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on air and we can connect that way. Revisiting some of what we didn't hear last week in the ongoing conversation about transgender individuals in women's locker rooms. Good morning, back at it, Springfield's Morning News. Live and local, I'm Greg Bishop on WMAY. Follow me anywhere, Bishop on air, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and you can connect with me that way. But let's hear from the transgender individual, Christina Newton. They believe that they were the ones that were really causing the concern here. And I shared last week, Christina said that they would not go to the family changing room, which is more private. They said that they're women, bottom line, and they feel that this conversation is hurtful and they don't understand the transgender community. Here's more of Christina Newton from last week.
Us at all. It's easier to judge than try to understand us. I always been open book, and that's how it's going to be. I explain. Somebody asks me a question, I explain. That's the only way you go to teach people about us, is telling them about us the proper way and the correct information.
So again, Christina Newton there sharing their thoughts about the overall debate. But the YMCA, they as well responded, at least to the Illinois Times, in person instead of just a statement that they got, because I've been getting statements from the YMCA as well. I asked the YMCA to join me on air today to address some of these concerns, but here is the YMCA defending the organization, and Angie Soul is the YMCA CEO, and here's what they had to say in response to the controversy at the YMCA.
What do you think the public should take away from this discussion in the community and this controversy over trans individuals using locker rooms?
What we really hope people take away is we're tired of just rehashing a story that's had several different versions and several different tellings. We just want to focus on what we're doing, the good we're doing in the community, what we've got to look forward to in the future, serving this community the way we have been. We were really instrumental during the power outages and everybody during the last storm, stepping up to help people in the community, providing programs and activities, and having 500 summer campers around the community under our care, youth sports, senior programming. We're just going to continue to focus on that. I just want people to focus on who the Y is, who the Y's always been, and who we're going to continue to be. And that's a Christian organization who's inclusive and celebrating each one of us as individuals.
Some people have questioned whether you're doing enough to protect children and young people. How would you respond to that?
I would respond that a lot of people aren't aware of the practices and the policies that we have in place for that. We take that very seriously. We're a national accredited organization, so we have certain standards in which we have to adhere to, background checks on employees and volunteers. We run our membership database every night against a sex offender list. We have extensive staff training. There's many things that go on behind the scenes in order to have us be the safest place that we can possibly be. They've been in place long before this issue, and they'll be in place long after.
So again, that's the Illinois Times sharing their conversation with the YMCA's CEO, Angie Soul. But the question that I had posed, and I have yet to hear back, was why is the YMCA putting the feelings of a transgender individual above the concerns that a minor girl has? Have yet to hear back. But the Y has previously said that they believe that it's against the law for them to discriminate against a transgender individual. Thursday at the Freedom Caucus news conference, you had State Representative David Freese, a practicing attorney, read off some of the law that he says is being used to justify this. But he pushes back and says that this is something that is being misinterpreted. So again, here's David Freese from Thursday during the Freedom Caucus's news conference on this issue.
I'm honored to stand here today alongside my colleagues in the Illinois Freedom Caucus and alongside Abigail Wheeler and her family. My comments today will be directed towards this false notion that the YMCA and similar facilities are somehow bound to allow the men who identify as women into women's locker rooms and other private female spaces. Come on. One of the laws that is commonly misquoted and misrepresented on this topic is the Illinois Human Rights Act. The Illinois Human Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity, states that there's an exception. Nothing in this article shall apply to facilities distinctly private. Any facility as to discrimination based on sex, which is distinctly private in nature, such as restrooms, shower rooms, bathhouses, and health clubs. Officials and people of authority, including those in Abigail's case, failed to properly understand the law. Instead, they subordinated statutory law, the Human Rights Act, to case law, citing two cases. The ACLU lawsuit against School District 211, which resulted in biological boys who identify as girls being given the legal right to unrestricted access to girls' private spaces. And a Hobby Lobby store versus Somerville, a lawsuit that resulted in employers being prohibited from discriminating based on either sex or gender identity in bathroom usage policy and practice. If radical case law pertaining to sex and gender identity prevails, the inescapable result will be the eradication of all sex-segregated private spaces for everyone. Regardless of what individuals are concerned about, whether it's statutory authority or case law, the simple truth is that Abigail and her teammates and every woman should be protected in these private spaces. The source of confusion comes from the recent bastardization of definitions of sex and gender. I cannot believe we're having this debate on what a man is and whether or not biological men should be allowed in women's locker rooms utilized by school-aged girls and children. Moving forward, I fully anticipate that my colleagues and I will propose legislation to try and reform these statutes based on biological gender assigned at birth, and if need be, the actual... and the actual anatomy of a person. We are willing to support whatever it takes to encourage other lawmakers, facility staff, and the general public to reconsider their positions on these issues and to prevent more stories like Abigail's from needing to be told.
So David Freese, state representative, part of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, sharing his understanding of the law and how he believes it's being misinterpreted in the case of the YMCA. I don't think we're done hearing about this. It was an interesting show of support for the Wheeler family outside of the YMCA on Thursday, and there was a sizable police presence as well. It had to have been a dozen police squad cars out there. They had one of those, cameras on a pole that goes up. I even saw a police drone fly overhead briefly. So interesting to see just the overall response. Not much disruption at all. There were a few, you could tell, transgender supporters there talking about trans rights or human rights, and very, very minor disruptions. But ultimately, the news conference went off with several hundred people in attendance watching and listening to the Wheeler family and those who have criticism of this policy at the YMCA, sharing their thoughts and their feelings. So obviously, again, a contentious issue, something that we're not done hearing about, and it'll be interesting to see where this goes at the Illinois State House, if at all, because you have a lot of policies moving forward when it comes to gender theory and degendering state statutes and allowing for transgender individuals to change their license, to change their birth certificates, and so on. So a lot of concern all wrapped up into that issue.